In this video, we're going to go back to the graphics library and we're going to see how we can go from drawing a line using the Breslau's algorithm to drawing a rectangle. So I have a Y and an X axis here, and I've drawn out some arbitrary rectangle. Now, in order to draw this out, we're going to need 2 points. So we're going to take 2 of the corners. Now we can call the one corner x1, y1, and we can call the other corner x2, y2. Now we're going to have to generate the other 2 points. But the other 2 points are generated quite simply because it's a rectangle. Now in order to get this point here, you can see that the y height remains the same. So the y value will remain at y1, and the value for our x will be the same as the value for the x here, the distance from here to here, which is going to be x2. So this point is x2, y1. And in this point here, again, whenever we head over to the left, you can see that the x distance here is going to be given by our x1, and the y distance here is going to be given by y2. So we can just change and swap these round about in order to pick the beginning and end point of each of the lines. So what we can do is we can use the Breslau's algorithm, which will take 2 points and it will join those 2 points together to generate a line. And in the first line we can take this point and this point as the 2 points on the first line, and then we can take this point and it will draw this line, and then this one and this one to get this line, and finally this one and this one here to get this line. So we're just going to use the Breslau's algorithm 4 times with 4 different sets of starting points and ending points. And of course we're going to put in the colour as well. So it's relatively straightforward. Let's have a look at the code. Now, as in the previous videos, we're going to have 2 pieces of code. The code on the right is the calling function, the code on the left is the subroutine. So let's talk through the calling function. So we're going to push the values x1, y1, x2, y2 and the colour onto the stack. We're then going to jump to the subroutine graph underscore rect, which stands for rectangle. So again, the jump to subroutine graph rectangle will just jump to a memory location. So the memory location it's going to jump to is given by 0x21E0, and again I've picked that out as per the mappings for our ROM. Now at that point we're going to jump over to the subroutine. The subroutine is going to run through and it's going to hopefully draw out the 4 lines which will generate our rectangle. And when it's finished, it will simply return control back to the calling function. So it will return control up to this end point and it will just end. So we can put our values in here in decimal for our corner points for our rectangle and also the colour here as well. So that's relatively straightforward. Now let's look at the actual subroutine. So again, the subroutine, we're going to pop the return address and we're going to pop the colour, and then we will be popping off the y2, x2, y1, x1. So that's us got all the information that we need sitting in a local memory location for this subroutine. Now, the first thing that we want to note here is that if we take the rectangle then the rectangle will just degenerate into a line if we have the endpoints that actually sit on a line as opposed to endpoints that are offset, which would generate a rectangle. So we could either draw a line horizontally or we could draw a line vertically. Now the other thing that could happen is that we could have all of the four coordinates could be the same. So that is, we could just have 2 points sitting one on top of the other, in which case the rectangle will just degenerate into a point. So we have to take care of these two possibilities first of all before we actually draw the rectangle. So what we're going to do is we're going to compare x1 and x2. So if the value for x1 and x2 are the same, then it means that we're going to in effect just draw a vertical line. So we jump if they are equal to the lines V, so that just stands for lines vertical. So it jumps down here to lines vertical. Now the other option is that if the y1 and y2 are the same, so if the y1 and the y2 are the same, then instead of drawing in a vertical line, it's going to draw in a horizontal line. So you can see here that we have the jumping to lines horizontal, which is this one here. So we'll quickly talk through these first of all. So you can see that if we're doing the vertical line, it jumps down to this point here. Now at this point we're then going to push these in a particular order. So the order we're going to push them in is going to be x1, y1, x1, y2, because the x1s are the same values here in this instance. And we're also going to push the colour, and then we're going to jump to the subroutine, which is graph underscore line, which in effect is our Breslau's algorithm. So it's going to go and run through the Breslau's algorithm, and when it's ran through the Breslau's algorithm, it will have drawn the vertical line, and then it will return back up to the calling function. Now the same thing will happen for the horizontal line. So in this case we push them in a different order. So we're going to push x1, y1, and then we're going to push x2, y1, because the y1s are the same. And then it's going to jump to the subroutine for the Breslau's algorithm. It will draw the line out, and then it will return to the calling function. Now if this isn't true for either of these, then all it does is it jumps to this continue. So it jumps down here, and at this point here we know that it hasn't degenerated into a line and it hasn't degenerated into a point. So we must have a rectangle. So what we can do is we can then push the values in order into our Breslau's algorithm. So we can push x1, y1, x2, y1, and then that goes into our subroutine for our Breslau's algorithm, and it draws the line, and then when it comes back out it just goes to this point here, and then we can pick the other sets of points to draw the second line, and then the third line, and then the fourth line. And again, these points here are just in the same order as you've seen in the diagram I showed you just a few minutes ago. And at the very end we jump back up to the calling function, which is up here, and then we end. So that's relatively straightforward, and you can see down here at the bottom we're going to have our start address is this point here. So this is where we're going to hold the local variables for this subroutine within the RAM. And we've also got a pointer to the Breslau's algorithm, which starts at this location here. Now we don't have any traps in this, because whenever we put the values in, it's either going to degenerate into a line or a point. So we'll either do rectangle, line or point. So let's have a look at it actually within the CPU, and we'll see it working. Now I have chosen these points here in order to draw out our rectangle. So we're going to have our x1, y1, which will be along 5 and down 5. And then we're going to have our x2, y2, which is along -2 and up 2. So the whole extent of this rectangle will actually be 7 units by 7 units. So let's have a look at this now. I have loaded the algorithm into the RAM, so let's just go ahead and we will run it. Now you can see it running here, and it's going to take a minute or so for it to actually draw it out. So the very first thing we're going to see is the dot coming in at the center of the screen. So every time I do something in the graphics unit, I put the dot so that we can see where the center of the screen is, and we know that we're going to work to the right is going to be a positive, left will be negative, up will be positive, and down will be negative. And there you see the dot at the center of the screen. So I will zoom in on this here, and we'll see the actual rectangle being drawn. Now, as I said, it's not going to do it all that quickly. So what I will do is I will record this, and then I will fast forward it, and we can see this being drawn. So that's it, completed drawing the rectangle. Well, in this instance it's actually a square, and you can see this is the center, this is the point 0, 0, and this corner here is going to be -2, 2, and this corner down here is going to be the 5, -5. So it has worked, and if we zoom out we should be able to see it have finished, and you can see the actual size of the square within the screen. So here is the square here, or the rectangle with the little center, and it has actually finished. So it does work, and we are now able to draw rectangles. So that's all for this video. Thank you for listening. I'll get you on the next video. Goodbye.